Postulate. Centripetal spirals multiply gravity to form the nuclei of Borning systems, and centrifugal spirals divide gravity to radiate nuclei into dissipating systems. Matter contracts into solids by squeezing space out of it. This draws its particles closer together and decreases its volume. Matter expands by swallowing space within it. This thrusts each particle farther apart. The north-south poles control generation into form. The east-west poles control degeneration of form back to its source. When true spheres have been generated, the four poles unite as one and then reverse their directions. Prolation then ceases and oblation begins. This universe is dual. It is a divided universe in which each positive half of every effect is balanced by its negative opposite half. For each hot sun, there is an equal cold vacuity awaiting in space to born another sun. Tides, when lowering, are simultaneously rising, and day cannot come without balancing night. Our senses can detect the expansion of matured masses into systems, for the fiery arms of expanding systems are visible in thousands of nebulae. Hot radiating masses are visible, but cold generating spirals which are creating hot bodies are not visible. The two black arms in every nebula are generating and contracting the hot radiating bodies which are its fiery arms. Postulate. Whenever there is motion, there are two magnetic poles to control their contraction into matter, and another two to control their expansion into space. When matter swallows space, matter disappears. When space swallows matter, matter reappears. Oblating spheres. It must be known that the north-south polarity, which divides the universal condition of rest into two opposite conditions of motion to create matter, must have a counterbalancing polarity whose office it is to void the two opposed conditions of motion to restore the condition of rest. Each of these oppose each other. One pair gains ascendancy for one half of the cycle. The other pair then gains it. This principle is demonstrated by the life half of a life-death cycle being stronger than the death half. Then the death half becomes stronger until the cycle is completed. In either half of the cycle, polarity controls its balance, but the office of north-south polarity is to prolate mass from its beginning at the base of a cone to a sphere at the cone apex, by extending the poles, while the office of the counterbalancing polarity is to oblate mass from a sphere to the base of a cone by extending its equators. In an oblating sphere like our Dian planet, the east-west polarity has gained the ascendancy. These two poles control and balance the extension of the Earth's equator, the expansion of its volume and its orbit into ever-lengthening ellipses as the Earth gradually flattens and increases its distance from the Sun. The converse of this effect is exemplified in our prolating Sun. It is not quite matured into a true sphere. Its north-south polarity is still preponderant and will continue to predominate until the Sun reaches true sphere maturity at its half-cycle point. Eons will pass before the four poles unite and reverse their positions and directions, which will begin the flattening of the Sun at its poles and its eventual disappearance by throwing off sequential giant rings. The Sun is still prolating while its planets are becoming increasingly oblate. The moment that Earth's or Moon's begin to oblate, that moment their equators leave the plane of the Sun's equator, and their elliptical orbits are extended by the extension of their two east-west foci. Newly born planets and moons, like Mercury and the 4 inner moons of Jupiter, hold to their planes of birth on the Sun's equator until they begin to flatten. Unbalanced atomic solar and stellar systems wobble. When a top spins swiftly enough upon its axis to maintain an angle of 90 degrees from the ground, it spins without wobbling on its axis, for it is in balance with gravity. Its axis points directly toward the Earth's center. When spinning slows down, its center of gravity is divided. The top then wobbles. We say that it is out of balance. Scientifically expressed, we should say that its balance is divided. To divide balance, its one center of gravity must be extended to 2 foci instead of 1. We exemplify this effect. 2 children play seesaw by alternately lengthening opposite ends of their lever. That divides gravity by throwing the lever off-center from its fulcrum. The fulcrum seemingly moves toward the short end of the lever to counteract balance. When the reversed motion takes place, the fulcrum seemingly moves to the other side of its own center to again counteract balance. That develops 2 seeming extensions of the fulcrum from its own center. The fulcrum has not moved, however, for the fulcrum is gravity. It has but seemed to move to 2 east-west points. It has seemed to make gravity oscillate between 2 extended balance points. These 2 east-west extensions of gravity are east-west magnetic poles, for they extend as such only for the purpose of keeping this universe in balance in its every effort. When the seesaw returns to its level, these 2 east-west foci withdraw into their fulcrum and cease to be, because unbalance has ceased to be. When the spinning top slows down, it leans away from its vertical axis. It has become unbalanced with its north-south vertical axis, which points directly toward the center of the Earth. That leaning describes a circle around its perpendicular axis. North-south is seemingly divided into an extended pair, which seems to cause gravity to oscillate. Those seeming oscillations are east-west extensions of balance which counteract and control any unbalance which threatens to upset the balance of north-south extensions. The above paragraph is fraught with meaning, which must be clarified. The relation of balance to gravity is so little understood that it should be made clear. We see a man on a tightrope extending a balance pole east and west from his south-north direction of counterbalance. Note, from his south-north direction to counterbalance any unbalance he may create. We relate the fact to gravity in a far too vague way of thinking. It should not be vague. We should know its meaning dynamically. Its explanation is given in 2 steps. The first step is to reduce it in principle to utter simplicity. The second step will be to amplify that simple fundamental. First step, we must first realize that creation is but the electric thinking of idea expressed by moving body forms imaged in the mind of the Creator. The moving body forms are created in the image of the Creator's imagining. The body forms are not ideal, they but simulate ideal. When man creates through forms for his ideas, his conception expands from the 0 point of its beginning. He builds a complete mental 3-dimensional form for his idea and creates a body to simulate that idea. He then fatigues from thinking that ideal and rests for an interval, before again thinking it into further form. The thoughts which he extends to cause body forms to appear, he now retracts, and they disappear. Body forms of matter appear when matter concentrates by thinking ideal. They disappear when mind decentrates to rest from thinking ideal. Mind of God and mind of man are one. The Creator thinks ideal as man does, by extending it in waves of electric thinking and withdrawing it by reversal of extended thinking. Briefly, then, we may define creation as a mind-imagined electric extension from a point and its retraction to that point. Second step. This universe is a sum total of electric actions and reactions expressed in thought waves of two-way motion. Every action is an outward radial extension of balance from one balanced condition to create two opposite equally balanced conditions. Every action is, therefore, an outward radial extension of balance from a centering point of universal balance. The extension of infinite radii from a dimensionless point brings into being a three-dimensional radial universe. It has length, breadth, and thickness, and it has form, the sphere. Also, it has measure, the measure of the energy which desire for extension gave to it. The desire to divide and extend one condition of rest into two intervals of motion are marked throughout the universe by the magnetic surveyor and controller of balance.